in general, what you will see is that my approach is really using really natural laws and not trying to go beyond them. I think that's the very general statement I'm going to make about my presentation. So the overview of the presentation is that I call this a geometric mechanism because I'm going to mix together a geometric model and a general physical law we're going to use to try to model the image formation that we have on the shroud. So it will be based, the model will be based on clearly observable properties of the image and the blood stains. I think this is very important. The model that we're going to build is really trying to answer what we see on the shroud. Not included in the model, the chemical and physical modification of the linen cloth by the image. What I mean by that is you've got people like Paolo di Lazzaro that have made experiments to show how the linen is transformed. Also, Giulio Fenti worked on that. He works on how the linen is transformed. But that does not address this problem. I want to separate the two problems. So just the geometric analysis will be done. The goal, because when you build a model, and by the way, this is something I do almost every day. As a computer scientist, I build a model of chemical reactions, of biological reactions, and even, in a system-wise fashion when bacteria is being simulated on a computer. So when you build a model trying to explain something you see, of course you eventually have to test the model. And the best way, because there's so many details to deal with, you have to use a computer. We can talk about it and all that, but the end point will be, is the model being able to, are we able to put in a computer, and what does the computer say when you run everything? So computer simulation is at the center of what I'm talking about in terms of goal. So the first thing I want to say is that the unexpected cleanliness of the shroud, it's a bit unexpected to see that on the shroud, essentially we don't have blood stains being spread all around. That's actually quite unexpected. I'm not actually going to solve that problem, but of course we have to assume somehow that when the cloth was put on top of the body of Christ, and actually all around the body, it was done in a very careful manner. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense if we try to model everything assuming something else. So for example, this picture, which is an excerpt from a larger painting, we can see that at one end there's a person holding both hands like this. That makes sense. And the way the body was put on the cloth also was done probably in a very meticulous manner. So this has to be assumed in the whole model. A very meticulous step or series of steps was done to put the body on the cloth and then wrap the cloth around it. There's almost no blood outside the image, except maybe at two places. One is the elbow. Blood seems to have dripped there. And also on one side of the foot, there's some blood out of the image. That's about it. There's no blood anywhere else. So that a lot of care was done. So nothing of that kind was done with the shroud. It's not possible. Or even the representation we have in the back, I don't think this is possible. Because the blood stains tells us otherwise. Modeling the natural world is very complex. You try to simulate something as simple as a bacteria. It's definitely not simple, extremely complex. So the first thing you try to do, trying to model anything on a computer, is definitely you try to simplify everything to the simplest level until it does not work. I mean, the model does not represent what you see. You do an experiment with a bacteria, you remove a gene from a bacteria, it doesn't die. Your model, you remove the same gene in your model, your computer model, it should not die. So you should see the same thing. Same thing here. So we can play with a model. So the model has to be adaptable. We have to be able to modify the model. For example, different covering. It's a different way of putting the cloth on the body. What does happen? So you have to have the possibility of doing that. So you keep things as simple as possible until it breaks. That's the way. So the main difficulty of what I'm going to talk about is actually simulating the cloth covering the body and flattening it. After I've looked at this problem for 10 years now, that's the main problem. The main problem is simulating a cloth, a real cloth on a computer. There was a presentation by Giulio this morning, which actually looks similar to what I'm going to present. I have no picture to present. Giulio had nice pictures to present. I have none. Because what I can say is that in what I understood from the presentation by Giulio did not, I think, simulate the entire cloth like a real cloth. I think it was curved with one parameter. But the complexity of the whole problem is that. And I've been looking at different software that actually simulate a cloth on a computer. And 10 years ago, I can tell you there was a very rough simulation. You could not use that. It was not possible. Then, in the last 5 years, things got much better. So you have some algorithm out there that simulate pretty closely a real cloth. And I think today, if we implement what exists out there completely, papers have been published. Lots of people have been working on that. Actually, it seems to be a simple problem. It's a very complex problem. If you take the latest algorithm and you look at them, it's pretty close to a real thing. So I think now the algorithmic technology to simulate a cloth is mature enough to do this kind of experiment. So this is actually a very quick experiment I did, and that's actually, there's two ways I think to simulate a cloth and experiment to try to create shroud-like images. Is simply, okay, the first thing you do is you scan a human body. You try to be as close as possible to a human body. So you have to take probably a different position, a real human body, you scan it, put it in a computer. It's the first step. Here is shown only the head. So I did that for the head, for example. Actually, the head which is there is actually a mannequin. It's not even a real person. But if you do it with a real person, you're going to get a full head. So the first thing probably to do is to work with the head, because it's the most complex part of the simulation. And the next thing, you simulate a cloth covering a human body. So you have to simulate the entire cloth going in a human body. That's a good thing to be able to simulate the cloth, because you can repeat different way of putting the cloth in the computer on a body without rescanning several times. And then you produce the image according to the geometric model. I'm going to talk about the geometric model just in a few slides. Then you simulate everything. You may change the parameters a little bit. You can play with the model. And then you flatten the cloth and you look at the image. That's one way to proceed. The other way to proceed, which is very similar, is you actually not only scan the human body, but you cover the real body with a cloth, because you try to get as close as possible to reality, so you scan a cloth over a body. Now, the big difficulty with that is that to flatten the cloth in a computer is very complex, because you lose the endpoints and all that. So I've tried to do that, actually, and from my experiment, currently, it's not possible to do that, really. So it's rather the first step, the first way to do it, method A, that I think is feasible. We have to simulate the cloth covering the body. The scanning of the cloth of the body is not feasible. I'm going to talk a little bit about, so now I'm going to talk about observation of the shroud. Observation of things that we see on the shroud that actually the image that we will produce with the computer has to match. And there are some basic ones, and one that everybody knows is the 3D information that we have on the cloth. The 3D information actually is being even questioned by some people. Some people say, no, there's no 3D information on the cloth and all that. But I think definitely there is. And it's a very simple idea. There's 3D information simply because, as everybody knows, is that the intensity of the color, of the brightness of the image depends on the distance between the cloth and the body. This is the main statement. This has been stated 200 years ago. 200 years ago, somebody realized that it has to be that way. I mentioned that during my presentation of Othon de la Roche. And here I'm just going to show you anaglyph. Everybody has a little, their table should have a little glasses like that. You can take it out from it's in a package, plastic package. You should remove it. And you put the glass on your eyes like this. and you're going to see an image. And I want just to explain very, very quickly what is happening here. To me, the anaglyph way to look at the image of the shroud in 3D is the most simplest way to look at the 3D. The reason is that, just to explain to you, how do we see 3D things? We see 3D things because we have two eyes that are separated like this. That's the main reason. And of course, we have a very powerful brain. The brain does all the work almost of looking at 3D images. And then an anaglyph image, what is it? It's simply two images indeed that are actually put on top of each other. But one image has been shifted slightly on the left. And actually what I mean by shifted is that every pixel of the image that has been shifted differently, depending on the brightness of the first image. And both images has been colored differently, one in red and one in blue. And so when you look using the glass has, as you can see easily, there's the blue and red filter. So one eye sees one image, and the other eye sees the other image, because the filter blocks, this filter here blocks the blue, and this one blocks the red. And so you see two images that exist in the image I'm going to show through different eyes. And you will see a 3D image. Now, I'm not totally sure if it's going to work with standing away from the, so I'm going to skip that one. So here's the face. So here's the face of the shroud, and you probably have to surround your your head around the glass because there's too much light. And if you look like this and you put it this, actually it's not that obvious to see it. You should potentially see some 3D effect. I'm not totally sure I see it from here actually. How many people see a 3D effect? A few hands. All right. I think it's a bit difficult to see from afar, and the screen is not very dark. It's not dark enough. I mean, the room's not dark enough. Huh? Depends on the light. Yeah, we need to close down the light, turn off the light to see it better. Because indeed, it's probably, I don't see it very well. Yeah, we don't see it that much actually. Well, on the computer screen, you can do it better. You can see it better. So actually, the glasses, you can keep the glasses definitely. You can bring it home, and on top there, you have the address of my website. Oh, no, that's probably better now. Now I think we see it well. Yeah, definitely. Now, no artistic operation was done. I didn't do any smoothing. It's just a very simple operation. Two images. I just one is shifted depending on the brightness of the original picture, and it does that. Of course, it's a pretty rare operation. If you take any photography, you do that. It does not work well. Anaglyph is usually performed by somebody that plays around with the picture, or you need two cameras and all that. So it's a rare thing that occurs for a photograph, and it occurs on the Shroud of Turin. So there's indeed 3D information there, it's definitely. So you can go to sendonology.org, because this picture comes from there. You will see this. You will see a tool called Shroud Scope, and the Shroud Scope has many images, and one of them is a 3D images. You can see the whole body, back and front, in 3D. Using the glasses, you go to the website. There's a way you will see all the parameters to select, and you can see on the Shroud Scope, you will see there's an option to say, show me the 3D anaglyph image. It will show you the 3D anaglyph image. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can mouse around and move the image left and right, and you can study the 3D image that way on the website. Cannot hear very well. The white, the blood stain, yeah. The blood stain comes out because the blood stain is very white. So everything, again, everything that is white is shifted a lot. Something that is gray is half shifted. So the blood stain comes out completely because, no operation was done to avoid that. Everything that is bright completely shifted. And then it shifted away, and then it appears to be like in front of us.
You're aware that the bloodstains are not encoded three-dimensionally on the shroud, aren't you?
That's of course, we can see that here. We can see that here, of course. So of course there are all kind of artifacts. If you put bloodstains completely dark on the original, you reverse it, it becomes white, and obviously it shows. Everybody knows that blood is not 3D. So of course there are artifacts. Okay, so let's move on. Actually, I'm going to skip that one. We're a bit out of time. Another observation I need to make is the top of the top of the head. If you measure the top of the head, this is using also Shroud scope, there's 23 centimeter. So this is another observation that if you do it on your head, if you lay down and then you measure, it's less than, most of the time it's less than 23 centimeter. So the shroud that went around the top is at least 2 or 3 centimeter away from the top of the head. It's almost certain. So the model that we build has to take into account that. This is an experiment that was done in 2005 where I have shown that it's possible to have an image that has almost no distortion by simply covering the sheet over a body. And if you measure everything, you realize that projection will create an image that has almost no observation, no distortion. All of that to say that a model that is reasonable is to simply cover the body, not bringing it tight towards the body. So a possible model is a very loosely covering sheet over the body should work. This experiment did show that. It's a paper I published in 2005. That's another thing here I need to mention is that Lavoie and others try to demonstrate that the blood stain we see in the hair, and obviously you can see the hair here, so that you can see the blood here in the air of the man of the shroud. Well, Lavoie wanted to demonstrate that it comes from the cheek. I won't go through the whole explanation here, but what actually he did is to show that it may come from the cheek, not that it must. Very different. And by the way, when we build a model, if the model works, it does not mean that the model represents reality. We should not forget that also. A model does not, if it works, does not really mean that it was done that way. It means that it may have done that way. So what is wrong here? It's not the blood stain, I think, does not come from the hair at all. For other explanation I don't want to give, to repeat that is actually provided in my paper, the 2005 paper. But here's another explanation I think that really shows that the blood stain we see in the air, here and there, comes from the air directly. This is the front side, of course the image as we well know. This is the underside picture, a photograph. This was kindly provided to me by the Turin authority. So it's a scan underneath the shroud. You see there's no image here. But of course we've got blood stain. The main blood stain that we see here, of course, has transferred from the inside to the outside. This is actually the outside of the shroud. The underside is the outside of the shroud. And so one thing that is very interesting to note right away, you see this blood stain here, the inverted tree. Of course, there's a big blood stain here that occurs. But where does it occur? It occurs over the eyebrow. It occurs over hair. Everybody agree? This is hair that we have here. And see on the other side, we have almost nothing. Almost no blood went through. Now check the blood stain. So we can say that if the blood stain comes from the hair, almost nothing will go through. And indeed, this is what happened here. You can see the blood stain here. It's supposed to be here. By the way, it's inverted. Huh? So the blood stain that occurs here should have transferred here. Almost nothing transferred. So It does not appear to have come from the cheek at all. If it touched the skin, if it touched the skin, if the cloth touched the skin with the blood, there will be a lot of transfer. Due to saturation with blood and liquid and capillarity, it will transfer. So this is not what happened. The blood stain that is here, if it had been on the cheek, would have transferred a lot, we would have seen it. And it doesn't. Another clear example. You see the blood stain we see here? Look on this side here. The first two, indeed, when we look here, it looks like it comes from the forehead. And indeed, it transferred properly. It went through. But the one here, the branch that we see here, did not went through. It is indeed in the hair, and indeed it does not transfer. To me, it proves that it was not from the cheeks. The blood stain we see in the face come from the hair. And I have to go now to the model. So the model itself. So almost all natural law, gravitation, radiation, electromagnetism, which is light, follow a simple inverse square law. That means the intensity of the radiation depends simply on the inverse of the square of the distance between the point of the radiation is created and the point it receives it. And all natural laws follow a shortest path. That means the radiation follows a shortest path. So I'm going to follow that. I'm not going to try to go away from it. So what actually this formula says, it simply says that the intensity of the color that occurs on the shroud, on the cloth, depends on the inverse of the distance, the square distance. Now, there's a parameter to add to this, which is alpha. This parameter alpha is actually the key component of the model. It needs to be found. The real value of this needs to be found. But it can only be found through computer simulation. So through computer simulation, we will find the value of this alpha. The alpha will tell us, so eventually the alpha will have a value such that, let's say, 1 centimeter or 2 centimeter away from the cloth, we should have an intensity close to 0, because it's what we see on the shroud. Things that are very far, like on the side, the radiation from the side, when it's 3-4 centimeters, seems to disappear completely. There's 0 intensity reaching the cloth. So this parameter alpha has to be adjusted to have this property. So we have to play with it, and eventually, and again, the main difficulty, 5 or 2? 2 minutes. So the alpha has to be done, and the shroud model will follow that, essentially. So the simplest model, there's no diffusion occurring here. I don't think it's required. Diffusion could occur too. We could probably implement that in a model. But as I said before, as long as this thing works, the simplest model is good. If it doesn't work, introduce diffusion. So just a little word about, some people say it has to go vertical, Well, there's many problems. I don't have the time to go through that. Vertical will create problem. We can simulate it and see. I believe it will create a contour around the body of Christ. This is what will happen. But it needs to be tested. I'm not totally sure. Of course, until it's not tested, but I think it's what's going to happen. So actually, you follow the shortest path. And just to show you, the shortest path does not create at first a big problem. Because, for example, here, let's say the cloth is here. Let's say this is the skin. The vertical radiation would go, if you take the vertical route, it's like this, but the shortest path is just a little bit off. So it will probably widen a little bit. It's okay. I'm just finishing with this, the cloth collapse hypothesis. I think the cloth collapse hypothesis is built on wrong supposition. Actually, in the paper of John Jackson, it says that it must go vertically. Like, it has a series of arguments, and it says the radiation must go vertically. I don't think there's anything proving that. I don't think there's any argument to say that the radiation goes vertically. Actually, it would be a major finding to have proved that. It's a must. It's the difference between must and may. It may have gone vertically by some argument, but to say that it must go, that means you have to remove all other possibilities, which I don't think has been done. There's another thing also, another hypothesis, which he called inference 3, and he says that Lavoie and Adler have identified a location on the shroud where body, when you say identify a location, it means the face, on the shroud where body images, features, and associated blood stains are in significant misregister. And he said, it follows that the shroud must have been in 2 distinct wrapping configuration. It's me. And actually, I just proved that it is not. And so I think the two major suppositions for the cloth collapse hypothesis does not work, actually. Thank you.